Assalamu alaikum, my dear friends. It's good to be with you. I want to clarify a small phrase in the Quran that appears at numerous times, and I want to show you how interesting the real translation of this phrase is, and how translators up till recently were not really able to hit it quite on the nail with this particular phrase. It's a very common phrase. It appears 8 times or more in the Quran. And the phrase itself says, khasiru anfusahum. And when it refers to those who are rejecting truth, it says that they khasiru anfusahum, they lost or they forfeited or they squandered themselves. So they lost themselves. And let me show you an example. I'm going to show you the translation first, and then I will show you my translation. Now this is one of the translations of this particular phrase, and let me first show you the Arabic of this excerpt, which is Quran 6 verse 12. قل لمن ما في السماوات والأرض قل لله كتب على نفسه الرحمة ليجمعنكم إلى يوم القيامة لا ريب فيه الذين خسروا أنفسهم فهم لا يؤمنون. So here's the phrase, and the meaning is, let's go to the meaning, and then I will show you how translators have translated this particular phrase. Now that's a very beautiful ayah. It first starts by saying this particular except, and then I'm going to go through more. Unto whom belongs all that is in the heavens and on earth. Say, unto God. And who has willed upon himself the law of grace and mercy. He will assuredly gather you all together on the day of resurrection, the coming of which is beyond all doubt. Yet those who have squandered, here comes the phrase, those who have squandered their own selves, let's go back. Those who have squandered their own selves, it is they who refuse to believe in them. Right, so there's that phrase. Now Muhammad Assad, as you will see there, translated as squandered. Pickthall translates it as those who ruin their souls. So Pickthall actually mixes up the word soul and self, because in the Quran we must be very accurate or very precise in the way we see the words, and you can't just willy-nilly switch meanings between the word soul and the word spirit. Now the word spirit is clearly translated as ruh in the Quran, and the word between the word soul and the word self. Now the word soul can be synonymous to the word spirit, and that is always translated as ruh in the text. But the word nafs is not really translated as soul. It's not translated as spirit. It is more translated as self, as personal, as ego. Thus the Quran admits to the dualistic existence of man as soul and ego. We have a soul and we have an ego. The ego is part of our animalistic self, of our makeup, and the soul is part of our deeper spiritual makeup. So the Quran does in fact admit, and it even states it, we've created man as a duality, and man is created as azwajan. So we are a duality. We are soul and we are self or ego. So ego, what is ego? What is that self that we're talking about? And here actually you can see Muhammad Assad translated as their own selves. So he's done a proper job by translating it as those who have squandered their own selves. Pickthall unfortunately goes and conflates the soul with the self. those who ruin their souls. Yusuf Ali also conflates it, and then in in recent times, or in contemporary times, the translator of the Quran in contemporary times, because those are very old translators, but those who have is Mustafa Khattab, and in his clear Quran he translated, but those who have ruined themselves will never believe. So he kind of similarly to Muhammad Assad, those who have squandered themselves, those who have ruined themselves. And that is pretty much the translation throughout. That is the translation throughout. For every occurrence I've checked, if you look at another occurrence, which is chapter 6 verse 20, 8 verses later, it says again, those who have squandered themselves. Right? It is translated again as those who have ruined themselves. And even if you go further, those have squandered themselves. That is chapter 7 verse 9. But now Mustafa Khattab said they have doomed themselves. If we go to the next occurrence of this phrase, then it says have squandered themselves, again Muhammad Assad, and then Mustafa Khattab says they've ruined themselves. So as you can see, they are basically referring to this phrase khasaru anfusahum, as ruined themselves, or doomed themselves, or squandered themselves. Now I've personally taken a different route with this, and I will justify the route in my translation. What does it mean if a person loses himself? Because that's a very difficult thing to understand. Somebody loses himself. And I even have Zamakhshari here. So let's just quickly look at Zamakhshari, which is, I don't have the English here, but Zamakhshari says, فَإِن قُلْتَ كَيْفَ جَعَلَ عَدَمْ إِيمَانٌ musabbaban an khusranihim. How does somebody who has no faith, or who does not embrace the idea of God and of the existence of the transcendental, how does that make him lose himself? Iman musabbaban an khusranihim. How does it make himself? Well, al-amr ala al-aqs, when you look around, it's actually the opposite. Those who have no belief, even in Zamakhshari's time, those who have no belief seem to be flourishing. They don't seem to be losing themselves. They don't seem to be at any form of loss. قُلْتُ, and then he says, قُلْتُ, I say to that, مَعَنَاهُ الَّذِينَ خَسَرُوا أَنفُسَهُمْ فِي عِلْمِ اللَّهِ. They, and then he explains it, Zamakhshari says, their loss is that they have lost in terms of being aware or knowing that there is a God. لِاخْتِيَارُمْ الْكُفْرِ فَهُمْ لَا يُؤْمِنُونَ. As a result of them choosing rejection or obscurantism or suppression of the truth, and failing or refusing to believe. So that is the famous Zamakhshari's explanation of the phrase khasiru anfusahum. So I'm coming to the way I see the verse, but before I come there, let me first tell you what informs my thinking. Now this is going to be a bit extended. I hope you still have the energy for this, because this is important stuff. We see this phrase in the Quran, and we need to make sense of the words, and we need to make the effort. Allah says, go and make effort in understanding the Quran. I mean, it's not about just trying to get the meaning and listening what the next guy says. I mean, Allah doesn't say for nothing that in this verse, لَقَدْ كَانَ فِي قَصَصِهِمْ عِبْرَةٌ لِأُولِي الْأَلْبَابِ. And Ulil Albab are people who put extra effort into understanding the Quran. Go the extra mile. And I've translated that as deeper reflection, very deep reflection, digging much deeper, Ulil Albab. And that is why I say to you that be patient I want to take you through this explanation, and that will bring you to a meaning that is more profound than the surface meaning that translators have done. And I'm not shooting down those translators. Those meanings that those translators give are important. They add value. But we can seek more profound meanings in the Qur'an by making that extra deeper effort. Now, I'm going to ask you for patience for a few minutes to bear with me. My background explanation when I show you my translation. I want to show you the translation, but you're not going to get it if I don't give you a deeper background explanation. Right. Now let's look at the theory, modern contemporary theory of humanology, of what constitutes man, what makes man man. Or I could be non-sexist and say what makes a human a human. Right. In contemporary research in social science, what people like Margaret Archer have written and theorized is that the essential thing that makes us human, the most essential core element, is not our hands, because the baboons have similar hands. It's not that we walk on 2 feet, because the ostrich also walks on 2 feet. It's not that we can articulate words, because the parrot can also articulate words. It's not that we can, be compassionate, because there's some animals that are more compassionate even than us. So it comes down to our ability to reflect wisely and to act based on that wise reflection. And that is really the essence of what makes us human. It is the act of reflecting and deciding. My friends, you can go to the animal kingdom, you can go to any animal, there is no consciousness and there is no decision making. Consciousness is the act of reflection on the world around us. That is how I see consciousness, how consciousness can be properly or justifiably defined. It is the practice of reflecting. Reflecting means thinking about everything. Now there's another word, reflexing, which is thinking and doing. And that is what the surgeon, the pilot, the technician does, is they reflex, they think and they do, That's a slightly more reflection, action process. But for us, in normal life, we reflect and then we act, and that makes us human. Are you with me? That is the most essential aspect of being a human being, being a man, being a woman, is to be able to reflect and act. Now, our reflection is informed by our personal nafs, by our personal needs, and by our soul. Right? So when we act out of interest, or we act out of concern. Those are the two things we act on. If you need to feed yourself, that's out of interest. If you want to help your brother who's struggling with his debts, with his payments, that is out of concern. There's no interest in it for you. So we act out of interest or we act out of concern. And by the way, we only hear the word acting out of interest in the kufr world, in the world of the contemporary modernistic world. They only speak about it's in our interest. So those who are only acting out of interest don't act out of concern. Right. I think I've made the point clear that what makes us human is that we can act based on our reflection, that we can make decisions based on our reflection. The problem is that in the postmodern society that we live now, and in any society that imposes a one-size-fits-all ideology, idea, mazhab, sect, whatever, any society that imposes such a sect on you, such a school of thought, such a body of thinking, such a worked out system of thinking on you, they deny you of that ability to think and act for yourself. You see, postmodernism in America now, in the West, they've reached the ultimate point of censorship, of banning any contrary views, of outlawing you if you want to criticize Zionism or Israel. And they have stripped you of the ability to act based on your own personal reflection. They have taken your humanity away from you. They've taken that aspect of you which makes you human, to think and act for yourself. But it's not just postmodern America and the West and and wherever. It's also those Sunnis or those Shia that are telling you that this is how you must think and this is how you must act, and you cannot think for yourself because the Mulvi, the Maulana, the holy men, the Ayatollahs, they've already worked out how you must think and how you must act. Now, in a society where the people become drones, that is a society where they've lost their humanity. Khasiru anfusahum. They've lost their very essence of what it means to be a human. But I'm not just saying that. Let me show you the work of Margaret Archer, and then you will see that this is not Anwar's exciting, made-up stories. And let's hear what Margaret Archer writes. The following quotations from leading postmodernists, that is contemporary philosophers, reflect not only on the death of man, with a capital M, so human, the human in general, but also the method of his demise. So the death of man, the loss of man, gone is man. And here we come to some of these quotations from very prominent. These are philosophers who are very much in vogue at universities, at Western institutions, right? And at universities that I've attended. These are the thinkers, these are the philosophers that are very, very much in vogue. The first one is Levi Strauss. I believe, and this is his belief on society, I believe the ultimate goal of the human sciences to be not constitute but dissolve man. That is Levi Strauss. That makes the point. Can you see the point? I'm going to take an excerpt of Baudrillard. Humanity, that spongy referent, to collapse finally under its own weight. That is Baudrillard. But one of the most fashionable contemporary philosophers, you cannot get a social science degree without citing Foucault. The French philosopher, Foucault, lived just in contemporary times. I think he passed away in the 70s, 80s. I'm not too sure. But Foucault, the famous Foucault, man would be erased like a face drawn in sand at the edge of the sea. So that is, my friends, makes the point that I'm making, that man is erased. And Archer, the author of this work, uses the argument that I've just presented to you, that what makes man man is the ability to reflect and act independently. Let me just take some more, read some more of the text here. With the spread of postmodernist consciousness, we see the demise of personal definition, reason, authority, commitment, trust, the sense of authenticity, sincerity, belief in leadership, the right of us to choose our own leaders, Because we are not saying that we want to act as individuals, atomistic in society, but we want the right to choose our own leaders, and that right is being denied. Right now in America, they are appointing the presidential candidate for the Democratic party. Kamala Harris is literally being appointed and not elected by that party. Belief in leadership, depth of feeling and faith in progress. In their stead, an open slate emerges on which persons may inscribe, erase and rewrite their identity as the time-shifting, ever-expanding, incoherent network of relationships invites or permits. That is Gergen. Identity are points of temporary attachment to the subject positions which discursive practices construct for us. They are the result of successful articulation of chaining of the subject into the flow of discourse. Now, let me just highlight the idea of discourse for you. In modern social science, there is no ideology. There is what is referred to as the discourse, the dominant discourse. Because ideology somehow has some idea of coherence, logical, rational coherence. But a discourse simply has to be a story, a narrative, a tale, something that is easy to understand or listen to. So my friends, I hope you're still with me, but I've given you the reasoning behind my translation. And now I want you to look at how I've translated that verse. Take a look at this translation. They forfeited their own personal agency and were left bewildered. خَسِرُوا أَنفُسَكُمْ وَضَلَّ عَنْهُمْ. You see, when people attach themselves to the dominant narrative and they lose their ability to reflect and act on their own, and that is the word agency means acting independently, acting on your own, thinking for yourself, thinking and acting for yourself. That is what the word agency means. They forfeited their own personal agency, but it also can mean they forfeited their own personality. They forfeited their individuality. They forfeited their own humanity. Well, for this purpose, I'm translating it to they forfeited their own personal agency and were left bewildered by their own false institutions. You see, the things which they thought were true, which they melted themselves into, which they dissolved themselves into, will turn out to be untrue. Let's look at another one. Those whose scales weigh down lightly are the ones who forfeited their personal agency by becoming suppressors of our evidence. They joined the crowd, they joined the dominant narrative, and they forfeited their own minds, their own free thinking. Another one. I hope you're still with me. This is quite a heavy topic, but it would be good if you can understand these phrases. Those to whom we gave the book are as accustomed to it as they are to their own children. They forfeited their personal agency and will therefore not embrace this message. So, because they lost their individuality, because they lost their sense of personal reflection and action, they will not embrace this message. Those who forfeit their personal agency will not become embracers of this message. Can you see the pattern, how it makes complete sense now? Is that people who are dissolved in the dominant narrative, who are dissolved in the sectarian madhab, who are dissolved in the Sunni Islam, who are dissolved in the Shia Islam, who have dissolved their personality into postmodernism, who have dissolved themselves into modern social science as it is preached at postmodern institutions, but where the thinking of people like Foucault and these guys dominate. They will not come back. They are unable to see the truth because they've lost their own personal agency, they've lost their own humanity. And if we go back to the translation of the other guys, may Allah have mercy on their souls. They are good men worked in the Qur'an, and then they say, yet those who have squandered their own selves. I think we are able now, as you can see, to see that there is a deeper meaning to khasiru anfusahum. Khasiru anfusa means losing your own individuality. Anfusahum, the word nafs means individuality, personality, ego. It is our individuality that we forfeit when we dissolve ourselves into a narrative, into a discourse that is not the sacred discourse or the Qur'an of truth, of what is absolutely rational, reasonable, and linked to reality. Once we link ourselves, once we dissolve ourselves into discourses that are not attached to reality, to the real world, then we cannot find the way. And that, my friends, is the explanation of this verse. I know it's been a fairly extensive path to explain it to you, but I hope you will understand that phrase better. The Arabic, الَّذِينَ خَسِرُوا أَنفُسَهُم, those who lost themselves, lost their individuality, lost their own reflection and action independent of the dominant discourse. Alhamdulillah.